All right, Matt Bowden, great to have you here. Actually, I want to start by saying you're one of the most magical people I've met, so I've been very excited to spend this time with you and speak with you about stuff. Thanks for being here.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So, told you I want to speak about drugs, obviously, and your views on consciousness and maybe some other tangents, but it'd be crazy to start with anything about your story. I guess it's so epic. So, can you share with us, like, where you came from and how you became someone who creates pro-drugs and all the other cool stuff you do?
Sure, okay. Well, I come from Aotearoa, which is the Māori name for New Zealand. It means the land of the long white cloud. If you've been there and checked out the weather, you'll understand why. And it's a place of New Zeal. Our ancestors went down there because they wanted to get away from Europe. I've just been living in Europe for a little bit, and I can kind of get a feel for why they want to get out. Weather's there is even worse. So I grew up in a family with, about 7 children, I think. And my folks were Catholic. Grew up in the North Shore of Auckland, went to Catholic school, just a boys' school. And so that's a bit of background. Did fun things, went to Scouts, learned survival stuff. I think most of our Scout leaders were Special Forces guys, so they were training us up and how to set up covert operations and crazy stuff like that, because that's what they knew. I guess when I was in my 20s, I was a guitar teacher for ages, played in rock bands and metal bands, used to teach jazz, metal, funk, fusion, country, classical, just loved the guitar, did some music at university. But when I was at university, I was like really young, I was like 16 years old, and I'd skipped a year in primary school and skipped a year in secondary school. I just wanted to get out of school and go to university because there were girls there and they looked interesting. I got interested, I guess, in spirituality. I was part of a Christian-y kind of movement, more into the spiritual side of not the sort of, happy are those who've never seen anything but still believe, but more the sort of, if you believe that you tell the mountain to jump in the sea, then it will. And, anything you ask for in my Father's name, you'll see. I was really challenged to just believe and change reality with my mind and with relationship with the Creator. And I practiced when I was a kid trying to be psychic or trying to practice telekinesis and all this, and never really had any success with moving anything with my mind.
But you were basically applying a Christian model to the mysteries of the universe?
Yeah, I just felt like this world wasn't real and there was something else behind it, and I was determined to find out what that was, I just felt like reality was really flimsy, and when I went to sleep at night I could see this other place, these other places, and so.
What do you think, where do you think that came from, this idea that reality is flimsy?
Well, a psychiatrist told me it's schizophrenia.
Okay.
And that he could give me medications that would take that feeling away. But I found it to be useful. Where does it come from? Just it feels like a memory or of a knowledge of something else. Do
you still have, what a psychologist might call schizophrenic symptoms now? Or?
Yeah, okay. I guess so.
Okay, well, so what do you think it is? I guess our first tangent. I was speaking with Brittany yesterday. I have a friend whose brother is like very schizophrenic, and to him, he has friends and a whole life that we can't see. And to him, we're kind of like a fake dream that he has to tolerate sometimes. But he has a whole life that's like very full and normal and rich. And I was thinking, like, are we just his dream? Like, who's to say? I was curious what your take is on that other world.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
For me, I found after a while, once I managed to sort of connect with the Creator, I could look at somebody and remember their memories and say, hey, this happened to you and this happened to you, and this is what's going to happen next. And from my perspective, I was just making stuff up, except that I didn't tend to get it wrong. And then that kind of, it provides reinforcement, unfortunately. But then you kind of realize that our 5 senses and our position in time and space is not as that's not all we've got. It's not as fixed as we thought. We can move around outside of that somehow. We can see outside of it, and maybe it's that. For a long time I thought maybe there's just a pattern, and you learn how to intrinsically see the pattern of events, and so you know what's kind of going to happen next. maybe it's more than that. Maybe we're connected to some other divine consciousness which is outside of this place, which is more what I'm leaning to now. And so then if you look and say, this person's schizophrenic because they think they're hearing things and seeing things. But if what they're seeing and hearing is can be corroborated as truth, then maybe we're viewing schizophrenia wrongly, and maybe those medications aren't as helpful as they look.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So have you, have you corroborated this stuff? Is this something you willfully go into, or is it kind of just comes and you use the information the best you can?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, I've seen in both in Christian movements and in other movements and New Age psychic, people are clearly channeling information from somewhere else, which is, you can get someone to jump up in front of a crowd of people and say, okay, you over there, your name is this. I could look at someone and just start feeling their history, sometimes their name, what they do, the major events that have shaped them, just being able to remember them and feel them. Now, what is that? Are people broadcasting that information? I felt like I was getting it from the source, the creator. It felt like it was coming from a loving, caring, benevolent parent thing that really cared about people and knew where they'd come from and where they were going and wanted to give them encouragement, set them free and bring healing, rather than from the person themselves.
And it was like this benevolent being is like saying all this stuff and you just happen to hear it.
Yeah. It's speaking through. It's like, I'm going to be your mouthpiece for a minute, and for me, sometimes it's words coming in, like looking at someone and seeing a word appear across their face. Sometimes their face would contort and change into another person or thing and then go away. It might be something I recognize that I'd seen on somebody else. Or sometimes just feel their emotions of the thing that happened to them, and then that emotion gets stronger and stronger and then quite specific. You're 6 years old and your teacher said this to you and bang something on the table, and then this happened and it caused this in you, and it's like remembering it, and the emotion is so strong you can feel that emotion, and then you get the specifics and you can tell them what happened, and normally they'll break down into tears or go into shock, and then you can bring healing, and the father is saying this, or the creator of whatever language the person is most familiar with, this is what's going to happen, and that realization, that healing kind of forgiveness or whatever it is.
Yeah, and whatever it is, like there's something about like that emotional experience that makes it more hearable, right? Like, yeah. Like for a long time I was very, very skeptical of anything like this, but two places where my skepticism and challenge was in acting classes when someone was really feeling their feelings. It was like you could almost read their past in a way with like specifics. And the other thing was like my first many hallucinogenic experiences, I always kind of wrote it off as like these are just projections of my mind or whatever. Yeah. But I had a bunch of mushroom experiences with friends where like I kind of forgot my ego, and then I could remember their memories. It was always benign stuff. It was like, I remember when we were playing Mario Kart in 1996 in a storm, and they were like, that's what happened to me. And it's like, oh, it didn't happen to me, it happened to you, but I remember it.
That's it.
Yeah.
So where are our memories stored that we can access other people's, or where is that coming from? What do you think you're picking it up? Are they broadcasting, or are you accessing something else?
Well, I think what you shared makes... like Carl Jung would have the idea of the collective unconscious. Like it's not like either of ours, it's just like in the cloud and we can like maybe download it, but maybe it's in my Google Drive because I experienced it, but you could also download it from there or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That's the model that makes the most sense to me right now.
Right. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Do you think it's always benevolent though? Because it's nice to think that. And I'm sure it's sometimes benevolent, whether it's a single being or many beings, but like I have some friends who studied to become ayahuasqueros, and they have all of this tradition of like you need to watch out for this kind of spirit coming to you when you're on ayahuasca, and like if it comes from the side, this might be a trickster. If it comes from the front, it's an angel. Like they have like I'm wondering if you have any experiences with like.
Totally, and this is where I would say that it's how we use substances. And it's a lot about the frame of mind. Even if you look way back at one of my favorites, the cannabis, back in the Bible, where cannabis is the plant used in the sacred incense, and it says, use this for worship. Don't use it for other stuff. So what's happening there is it's opening you up spiritually, I guess. And if you're focused on your relationship with the Creator, your worship and just focusing on the there's a divine consciousness which is real, and you're connecting with that, and you're in that state of mind. That state of mind's amplified. Then that's the frequency that you're tuning into. But if you're in a really dark space, if you're not sure about where you're at, or some other rubbish is happening, and you take a psychedelic, then you're going to connect to something else. You're going to connect to a polar opposite. You can channel other stuff, for sure. And I think that our heart is like a lens. If you imagine that you're projecting a movie through a lens, if there's dirt on that lens, you're going to project that. And sometimes if we've got something in our heart, like some unforgiveness or something yuck against somebody, and we're moving in power, then that kind of projects out. You can tell if someone's speaking or channeling or preaching or something, and there's sometimes there's like a dark thing over them, and they got something yuck coming out. It's often unforgiveness or bitterness or something, and it colours what's coming through.
And that's like a person's demons. Have you heard of the book On Becoming an Alchemist? It's
I haven't heard of that one, but I'm just going to write it down right now. On Becoming an Alchemist,
or On Becoming the Alchemist.
On Becoming the Alchemist.
I read it. It was one of the first books about spirits and manifestation that really vibed with my mind. But she had this idea that angels and demons are simply kind of a demon isn't evil. It's kind of just a lower level emotion. So jealousy is kind of like an entity that takes over your body, or unforgiveness is like an entity that you can attract, and it'll be stuck with you. And Carl Jung would say what primitive people call their demons and angels are just emotional things that are stuck in us, or not stuck in us and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think the word angelos means messenger, and demon is unclean spirit. And yeah, totally. I think there's but there's some entities, I would sometimes look at a person and just see a particular thing on their face. For me, I just see it visually. Okay, you've got that. It's something I've seen on other people, and I know what it is. It's this person's, maybe they're a masturbation addict, and they've got this lusty, horrible thing, and they feel unclean all the time, and they're projecting it, and they're scared that you're going to see it. So it's on their face, and you can see it, and you think, okay.
Cool. What will you'll actually see? You'll actually see a thing?
I see a thing, yeah, and I recognise it. I'm I've seen that particular thing before. I don't know what it is. How it represents to me might be different how it represents to anybody else, but it's I can see it and recognise it. I think, I know it's that thing. And you get some guys in the Christian scene who are real good with deliverance. They can just come up and say, I can see this and this and this on you, and break them off. And I know there's shamans who same sort of thing. They can just see it and sense it. You can kind of choose what you plug into. I think a lot of people that are in religions are primarily driven by fear, and what fear is an anticipation of something real bad happening, or giving power to misfortune. It's the opposite to hope, which is kind of that feeling that, hey, something good's going to happen, everything's going to be good. But people who are locked into fear, it's kind of like they're plugging the plug into the plug hole wrongly, and so they channel this horrible, judgmental nastiness, which is in a lot of the older religions, and it's a big part of within a lot of people that are in the Christian thing as well, is they've got this, they're trapped into this thou shalt not, other people are doing wrong, and somehow justifying themselves at what they're doing and feeling guilty about themselves, and it doesn't allow for really good channeling of healing or anything like that, And so it's a bit of a life mission, is to set people free out of that kind of crap.
Yeah, and then such a person is more likely to make a religion or a person their surrogate to God, as opposed to direct connection. And that's I think how people get manipulated.
Yeah, it's like a fatherless generation, I guess, people that don't want to go back and connect directly to source, and that's what a lot of the religions were, is they want to have these priesthoods and things. Whereas Christ came along and said, hey, let's move on from that. Yeah, just go direct. Yeah, and people said, oh, let's get rid of that guy.
Wait, so going back to when you were, I guess, a teenager, you said you started experimenting with manifestation, or
and it just really didn't work. Someone told me I should ask Christ in my life when I was at university, and I was really offended. I thought I'd been brought up in a church, I can probably write books about this shit. And but I did, and I was by myself on a ferry boat one day, and just on my way home, and something kind of came over me. I put my head down and said, I want you to cover my life. I just want you to, I just do whatever you want. I'll give my life to you. I felt something lift off me, and someone was standing in front of me. I was just doing this silently in my head. This old guy standing in front of me, and he looked at me and he pointed at me and said, God will be with you as long as you live, son. God bless you. He's really drunk. He's out of his skull, but he just walked up to me and said that, and then walked off, and I just thought something just changed. And my personality changed. I went from being really introverted to being extroverted. My handwriting changed from tiny little letters to great big bold stuff, and I felt like the door to Narnia had opened and the lion had come out and breathed on me or something. I started. I read something about Christ in the boat with his buddies when there's a big storm, and they woke him up, and he was kind of annoyed that they'd woken him up, that they didn't tell the storm to be still by themselves. He told the storm to be still, and it did. And I thought, oh well, I better make sure that I start practicing this. And so if there's bad weather or if I was getting rained on, I would just tell it to stop. And by the grace of God or whatever, it did. And this just kept happening. I could do this with people watching as well. And so, which was really cool. This happened for a while, and unfortunately it went to my head. Because I was feeling insecure.
Yeah. But you were, as far as you could tell, literally changing the weather? Okay.
It would be pissing with rain. I remember I told my mum how I found God, and she's like, oh, no, you've been sucked into a religion, a cult. I'm like, no.
But didn't your mother raise you?
Catholic, yeah. It's there's not so much focus on directly relating to God. It's more of a vibe, and my parents are great. I don't want to diss my parents. They highly evolved, conscious, beautiful beings. But within their kind of the teaching that they've got from their generations, to think that you could just go directly to God and make demands or expect to be able to just walk in the door and it's kind of really presumptuous, and you should lower yourself, and you have priests to talk to God for you and to dish out your forgiveness. And I think that's actually one of the largest tragedies of mankind, the idea of this priesthood, which is, it's like saying having a baby and the baby's not allowed to cuddle its mum or its dad, only the doctor's allowed to touch it. It's like, hang on, that's wrong. Yeah. It's so wrong. I remember walking out the door one day, and she said, you're going to need a raincoat and an umbrella. It was pouring with rain. I said, actually I don't. I command the rain to stop. And the rain did stop at that second. And I just walked out thinking, oh, this is good. And then the next day, she told me to do the same thing again. My dad was there, and she said, why don't you stop the rain again? I'm like, it's not me that's stopping it, it's God, but I'll ask. And it stopped. And they asked me to get out of the family and go and live somewhere else. Because that was obviously, I was in league with the devil, because anything that you don't understand when you're in those mindsets is evil. And it's still the way that a lot of people see the other religion, is, okay, that obviously their stuff's evil because we don't quite understand it. And where I'm coming from now is, it's like the five guys, blind man who find an elephant. One finds the trunk, one finds the leg, one finds the tail, and says, no, the elephant's like a tree. And the other says, no, the elephant's like a snake. The other says, no, the elephant smells like something really bad, because they've just seen different parts of the same thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And was it around this time that you started using psychedelics, or did that come later?
Much later. I had this spiritual kind of a gift. I could do that stuff, A lot of my friends that I just met in the same movement that couldn't do that stuff, and thought maybe they were naughty or bad, or God didn't like them or something, But it was just they didn't have the same sort of gift. We're all part of one body. Some people are an eye, they can see. Other people are an ear, they can hear. Some people can think real good. Others are hands. And I could just sort of see a lot, that's all it really was. But I had people that were jealous, and I felt resentful, and I thought this is kind of crap. And then when I looked at what was going on with psychedelics, like what shamans did, I realized that there were plants and fungi and things all over the planet which have been put here on the planet, that if you pick them up and eat them, then you're spiritually more open and you can see and hear these things. And I thought, well, that's a real good solution, isn't it? For people that are maybe spiritually a little dull, or don't really have that gift, or want to experience that. And that got me interested in it. But then, I was kind of just music teaching and doing that kind of prophetic-y, psychic-y kind of stuff for most of my life. I just sit and pray and fast and try to see and hear and see visions in my mind, and that without using any psychedelics or plants, just based on I've got a relationship and I'm just working with that. And what happened? I decided, someone said, hey, you got no money, you should get a job. So I got into marketing and found that you can actually use the same thing in business. You can just ask what's the right way to go, what sort of business should I start, and went for a work at a publishing magazine that wasn't doing so well. And I said, ask God why. He said, do this, this, and this. And it started some magazines that took off and were doing really well. But I should do this for myself. Someone came in my office one day with these pills and said, do you reckon you can market these? What are they for? Well, they're for people that they're kind of like safer alternatives to drugs. I thought, okay. So I started looking at it, realized that they were similar to the plants that open people up spiritually, and thought, well, that's actually really useful. So we were looking at marketing these things, and then I was thinking, is this the right thing for me to be doing in my life? And then I had a family member, third cousin, who was an ecstasy death in New Zealand. He took too much MDMA and didn't understand that, I like to say, just like everything you read in the media about ecstasy, it's really good to take it with a bunch of salt, you need to replace your electrolytes, and he didn't know that, and he drank too much water and he died in the car parks outside the club, leaving a child behind. And I sort of woke up to it and thought, okay, that this is kind of, we need to do something about this. This is all wrong. He didn't have the information because the stuff's illegal. And I used to have, I used to say, hey, God, I want to be a rock star. That's where I figure that I could be most useful to you. And I used to get people saying to me, no, you're going to do something else. You're going to be talking to politicians and changing laws and standing up for that group of people in society that have no voice and can't stand up for themselves, and those who are slaves and lepers. I thought, what the fuck does that mean? That sounds boring. It sounds like having to wear a suit and get a haircut. Fuck. And then what else happened? I had someone contacted me and said, hey, do you want to come over to Australia, which is a bigger, scarier country, and work for my company? We're trying to find some drug alternatives as well, like what you're doing in New Zealand. Maybe you can come and work for us.
Because you already started doing this in New Zealand.
Started doing this in New Zealand, marketing herbal highs and things. And my accountant did a background check and said, dude, that guy's got like 20 million in the bank. Go hang out with him, see what he wants.
But at this point, you had already created like an alternative to meth, right?
Well, I just started importing and marketing some herbal products from England.
Okay.
With ephedra type compounds and lysergic acid type compounds, and from plants. And so I went over to do this job for this guy. He said he had good legal advice, and everything we were doing was totally legit. And I was just so young and so naive.
How old were you?
I was in my 20s, I guess. But pretty sheltered. And so I went over to Australia, and he asked me to get some samples, and I got a bunch of samples because his lawyers told him it was all good. On the plane, I got this really weird feeling. I go, what's going on? This very clear message comes and says, you're under surveillance, you're going to get stopped at the other end, and they're going to search you, but don't worry, they won't find anything. I'm like, wow, that's a weird thing to hear, And I'm on the plane, I get to the other end, and people come up and grab me and say, oh, let's check your name, check your passport, okay, you've ticked a box saying you're not carrying any drugs today, and checking in my bags and stuff. Weirdly, they didn't find anything. That was really, really strange. I was sitting there ready to explain, but they didn't find anything. So I walked on through, and turns out the guys that I was working with were all gangsters. They were all carrying guns and selling kilos of cocaine and stuff, and it was quite a heavy scene, and but it was quite exciting. And I thought, I'm meant to be here. I started working with them, trying to find, can we find a safe alternative to meth, a safe alternative to cocaine? But I mean, they were gangsters. They didn't really want to do something legal, I didn't think. And one day, came back from a nightclub one night and ran into my apartment to change my shoes. And the guys had really liked my apartment. All the walls were made of stone. So they bought the entire block and evicted all the neighbours and moved in. And so I was living at a Bandito headquarters. And a policeman comes to the door. I open the door, and he's looking into my apartment where I've got all chemicals and things lying around. And he's saying, hey, we just found a body in the alley, and just saw you coming in, and we know that you just arrived now, but I wonder do you know if your neighbours would be awake next door? Or maybe they might know something about the body. And I said, dude, hey officer, I think my best advice to you is, if you don't know who lives next door at number 4, pop back to your patrol car and call in backup before you knock on the door, because I'm picking that they're awake and that they may know something about the body in the alley. Is that cool? I'm just trying to do you a favour. And he said okay, and walked off, and I packed my bags and went to the airport and went on back home to New Zealand. And that's kind of how I got started. I got to New Zealand, and there's a guy there sent to give me a full intelligence profiling and to analyse whether or not I was a threat to New Zealand. So I'd been under surveillance, and they said, you're working with terrorists and creating new drugs. You can come back in the country, but we really want to keep an eye on you. And I just said, look, I just got in with a really bad crowd, and I actually, it's annoying because I think I've found something we could use as a substitute for crystal meth, but they weren't interested in doing it properly. They just wanted to keep gangstering. Yeah. So I'm going to work within the laws, and I'll be transparent, but I think might be able to develop some solutions.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a chemistry background, or how did you?
The funny thing, when I started getting interested, I just thought, well, I just want to learn this, and contacted some friends who were pharmacologists and said, what do I learn at varsity? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, the varsity might not want to teach you exactly what you want to learn because they're kind of careful not to lead people down that path. But I ended up getting private tuition and just paying people money to teach me and just reading all the scientific literature until I could understand it and asking questions and going back and reading. And just sort of learned that way. And eventually, after a few years, guys were coming to me saying, hi, I've got a double degree in medicinal chemistry and pharmaceutical design, biochemistry, kind of a job. And I'd say, yeah, this is your job. Also, you need to spend some time just training me and bringing me up to speed so I can understand. And so I just kept learning and learning and learning. If you're in the industry, you can learn quite a lot if you just jump in. Yeah. You can learn better, more practically and faster than going to school. Yeah,
and that's with most things.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah. Cool. All right, so then you started creating this, you had this legal company create this meth alternative.
Yep.
Right. And then that took off until...
Yeah, so in New Zealand, meth was just starting to take off. People used to snort meth. There's no cocaine. The boat doesn't stop in New Zealand. It goes from South America, wherever it comes from, and it goes to Australia, and there's none left by the time it gets to New Zealand. It's a too small a market, so everyone makes their own stuff. New Zealanders, we came generations ago from the mother continent, and there was no infrastructure, so everybody built their house themselves with their hands, and we just make whatever we need ourselves. Musicians, we build our own recording studio from scratch and make an album that way. And so for drugs, we just go to the pharmacy and we get the ephedrine and hydriotic and whatever, and we just make the meth ourselves in our house, and that's how it works, because the boat doesn't stop. It's so isolated. It's it's down there. You've got the South Pole, you've got Australia, and then it's a long way to get anywhere else. So we found benzylpiperazine was a compound which we figured was going to be safer than meth because it had been present as the metabolite of an antidepressant that had been through some trials before. So it had a history of safety and known toxicity. And in 73, someone had given benzylpiperazine to amphetamine addicts to see if what the effect was. And the amphetamine addicts said, yes, we like that. That could substitute for us, but not as much as we don't like it as much as meth. At the time in the 70s, they thought, okay, we need to ban this substance. It's obviously dangerous and bad. But looking at again in the year 2000, when there's what the media were calling a meth epidemic, people were going from snorting their meth to smoking it and injecting it, and just that change of route of administration meant that it was way more addictive and way more likely to cause psychosis and take you way too far. People were losing their homes and their families and just going nuts, getting in debt to gangs, and gangs were taking over everyone's businesses. Organised crime was just being massively empowered by this horrific addiction. And so...
Just one question. With the psychosis, going back to the other thing, I don't know anything about meth, but do you feel it's also tapping into another world, or is kind of, with a drug like that, it's kind of just them going nuts?
So I guess the way that we've evolved, sorry if you don't like that word, it appears that our bodies, at least, evolved over a long period of time. To start off with, our brains kind of got this real reptile brain, then an animal brain, and then a higher kind of consciousness brain wrapped around that. The different drugs kind of like tune us into a different frequency. They empower different parts, and that meth that's really putting the animal brain back in control. It's putting you on that adrenaline buzz, that fight or flight. And so normally that neurotransmitter is useful if you're a kind of a primitive person, you're being chased by a large animal, you're going to run away or you're going to attack. Those are your options because the enemy is near. And if there's, you're a 21st century human being now, but you shot some meth or snorted some meth, then you're going to get to a point where the enemy is near and it's probably the person in front of you, so you shouldn't be trusting anybody anymore and you need to fight or flight. And so that's all you've done. You've just switched the channel. Is there a spirit involved in that? Yeah, maybe. If you like to conceptualize these energies as spirits, then yeah, you could say that person's been taken over by a spirit.
Like maybe a lower consciousness being then. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what's happening. Does that mean you could just cast the spirit out and the person would be okay? Well, that's an interesting question. I don't answer it. I don't know. There's different theories on that kind of stuff. Could you just tackle that problem spiritually and just remove the ruling energy force behind it, or do you need to make some other changes as well? I don't know. Okay, well, I was wondering. But then you created this benzyl
piperazine.
Benzylpiperazine.
Similar kind of a structure to an amphetamine, but a little bit different. The ethylamines kind of closed around, cyclized into a piperazine. So you've got it's like 6 little carbons in a ring, but 2 of the opposite ones are nitrogens instead. That's a piperazine. Okay. So it maps loosely into the same kind of receptors.
Actually, one question, because you've shown me different molecules and how things work and how you change the carbons to nitrogens. Is there a way for chemists or anyone to know the effect beforehand? Like, if we switch this with a nitrogen, it's going to not be addictive or something? Or does that have to just be like trial and error and then
At the end of the day, it's trial and error because there's always exceptions to the rules. But there's a certain amount we know. If you imagine that in your brain, all around your body, there are receptor sites, and a receptor site is like a keyhole. Each one is a different shape, and as our bodies have different neurotransmitters, different things flowing around them, serotonin and dopamine. There are these different rivers of different fuels: serotonin, dopamine, noradrenaline, etc. And these neurotransmitters, each one is a certain shape, like a key that is going to fit one of those keyholes. And so your serotonin molecule fits into a serotonin receptor. And so what we're doing with drugs is that what we're doing is, as human beings, when we eat different things, we look around the planet, and each different plant has got a different biochemical makeup, and different plants have got molecules in them, which when we get them into our bloodstream, they are maybe almost the same shape as those neurotransmitters. And so they plug into the receptor sites and flick a switch,
Gotcha. That's kind of like what I guess Alexander Shulgin did with he did with mescaline. Okay. I was just wondering if it's just like you just try every chemical and see what happens, or you're saying you kind of know what the shapes for each lockhole are. Okay.
We can map out the receptor site and get a feeling for what shape it is. The other things that we can do is we can look at structure, activity, relationships. So we know that Alexander Shulgin saw what shape the serotonin molecule was, for instance, and then made a whole lot of different modifications and T-colored all the different sort of tryptamines, and then mapped them out to find out what they would do and listed the effects. And you can sort of see a pattern. Whenever we put a methoxy on this position, it does this with a potency, and whenever we do this to the tail, then it makes it gives it a stronger affinity for this receptor site instead. And so you can sort of make a rough prediction based on structure, activity, relationships, and we can whenever we put a chlorine in this position, it causes toxicity, so we make sure that we won't do that again. We'll just avoid it, assume that that's a rule. We know that if we put a sulfur in this position, then when the enzyme binds to it to try to break it down, it causes something toxic, which can be fatal, so we're not going to do that anymore. We're just going to rule all those ones out. And so there's structure, activity, relationships, and the other thing you can do now is you can sort of basically do computer modeling. So you take all of the data you've got, feed it into a computer, and say, like an AI, and say, what will this molecule do? Okay, this molecule we know will hit the CB1 receptor, so it will be like THC. So you can get a computer to do it for you, or you can, after a while, you can see a pattern in all the molecules you've created and tested.
But with like emotional, like subjective experiences, is there something one-to-one? Like I remember before cannabis was legal, I heard people were always saying like they're gonna modify cannabis so that they can remove the paranoia or something like that. Is it like they know that paranoia is caused by cortisol, and they could be like, oh, we're gonna remove this thing that is it that simple?
We really tried. We took the THC molecule and thought, okay, let's make a whole bunch of modifications. For me, there's like 8% of the population that, due to their DNA, when they take cannabis, it could bring up like a latent schizophrenia. It can be absolutely terrifying. I'm like that often. You know, I take some cannabis, I feel like my soul is being sucked out into the earth, and there's nothing I can do about it. Learning meditation here really helped with that, but usually I just won't take a lot of cannabis. I'll try to stick it on the outside of my body.
Gotcha.
So I thought, well, you know, what, maybe we can make a modification and get rid of that. But it seems like that paranoia is inherently kind of linked into the CB1 receptor, which also causes the...
So it's the person's keyhole, right? It's not the type of key.
You can, I mean, there's things that you can do, like you can make a key that's a little looser, that doesn't lock in quite so tightly. That's what we did with that benzylpiperazine. Because the key didn't quite fit the keyhole, it wasn't as potent as methamphetamine, and it also was less addictive. It kind of gave an experience which was, wow, this feels great, but the next day, you had to take 10 times as much of it as you do with meth, and the next day you feel kind of sick and feel like, I don't want to do that again, I feel crap. People complain, this is the shittiest drug ever, I felt crap the next day. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's why nobody got addicted to it. And people who were addicted to meth crossed over to this and then came off. And so when we showed it to the Ministry of Health, and the government set up an expert committee of scientists to assess new drugs that came along, and so we basically mirrored that and created our own expert committee of scientists with similar sort of qualifications to produce the information and research that we were able to feed them and say, this is our risk analysis of this drug. We think it's a risk level which is comparable to other normal daily activities that people take part in, and so we don't think it needs to be illegal, because laws need to be the word's got away from me, I hate it when it happens. We can edit this, right? Proportionate. That regulations and laws and controls put on people's lives need to be in proportion to what you're trying to regulate. So if you've got a drug which is going to kill a whole bunch of people, then we need to control that. But if you've got a drug which is not so dangerous, maybe you've got an experience where we said, okay, if you're flying in a 747, you've actually got a 1 in 7 million chance of losing your life every time you do that. If you are driving to work in your car in the Auckland traffic for a year, you've got a 1 in 10,000 chance of losing your life when you do that. If you are skydiving, or if you're swimming at the beach, you can work out a ratio of what the chances that you're going to die. And we made 26 million pills, and they were consumed by 400,000 consumers over 8.5 years on 10.5 million occasions with no deaths, which told us that you've got a less than sort of 1 in 10 million chance of dying eating the pill. So eating the pill is safer than flying in an aeroplane or driving to work or going to the beach. And so those are normal activities. More people die falling out of bed than taking an ecstasy pill. The ecstasy pill is, the chance of death is similar to a female contraceptive pill. And so do these things need to be illegal at that level? If we're just looking at it really, objectively, maybe it doesn't need to be illegal, especially if making it illegal makes it more dangerous. This is the logic that we worked on. And our government said, yeah, this is making sense. The reason we have laws is to reduce harm to consumers. The reason we had so I went and looked at the drug law in New Zealand. The policy behind it is harm reduction. We want to reduce harm to consumers. And so we need solutions that are going to reduce harm. We need risk management solutions. And so the basis of risk management is first you do a risk assessment. And if it can be shown that providing a safer drug alternative will reduce the consumption of more dangerous drugs, reduce the number of deaths, reduce the number of hospital overdoses, furthermore will reduce the need for expenditure on law enforcement and on justice, putting people in jail and chasing them around and messing their lives up, then that actually takes significant sort of financial burden off the country. And if you can then also tax that, so that we're putting money back in the coffers, this is the case that we made to the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health then got the Revenue Department to analyse it, and they made the same case. They said, this is the way forward. We need evidence-based policy where we use science and knowledge to create, or to allow an industry to create safer drug alternatives. And then we went and so that worked. They said to me, look, when I went to the Ministry of Health, hey, I've got this idea. I'm a family member from an ecstasy death. Another friend of mine at that point, who we can talk about later, commits suicide at a party on crystal meth, walked through a plate glass window, figured he was invincible. So no one would believe him he was invincible. They just said, dude, you're just high. And so he saw a katana on the wall, a samurai sword. So he took the katana and said, watch this. And he disemboweled himself. He stabbed himself 38 times through the chest. He was a big, strong man, and he impaled himself in the wall and died. And it was horrific. And so I had these two things in my mind. So I went to the health ministry and said, hey, we need to change the way we're dealing with the drugs. Why can't we just decriminalise and regulate these drugs? And they said, we tried it with marijuana, and America said they were going to stop buying our meat and cheese. So if we try to move away from the 1967 UN Charter on psychotropic substances that we all signed up to, all us little countries where we got bullied into it, then we get trade sanctions, and
then not very long later, most American states legalized it.
Now, thankfully, the American people also stood up against the American federal bullshit and said, hey, this is so wrong, it's evil. I mean, my conviction is that if we look at the history of drug prohibition, we see it's largely racially motivated. And so you've got colonists that are cruising around the planet, colonizing, New Zealand, Australia, South America, all these places, and there's culture shock because they're saying, oh, well, these people have got different values. Part of it's the religious guys saying, oh, you're taking mushrooms to connect to God. Well, that must be evil. Let's make that evil, make that a taboo. It's evil, it's demons and the devil. So you've got to be part of our religion instead, and yours is all wrong. And so part of it was that misunderstanding, and then part of it is, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could just make a rule to control all the black people, the Africans and the Mexicans? Why don't we just do something dietary and outlaw their cultural practices? Then we can just lock them up when they're just eating the things that they want to eat. And then you've got a situation where the choice where people who consume alcohol, I've got European DNA. My people have been consuming alcohol for so many generations that we've actually adapted genetically. We produce higher levels of dehydrogenase, the enzyme that breaks down alcohol. Whereas people with African DNA, they've been on the hemp for so long that they've got a differently developed cannabinoid system because they can process cannabis better. They get paranoid. And so then you make a law that says that choosing cannabis to relax is somehow wrong, but alcohol's okay. Then that law, it's not just culturally insensitive, but it's genetically biased. And so you've got laws which are genetically biased, which are racially discriminatory. That's just so wrong. Then you end up with disproportionately high numbers of certain genetic subtypes in jail that are criminalized based on their DNA.
Yeah, and Native Americans and Asians who don't process alcohol very well and they get flushed. I guess there's more toxicity for them with alcohol.
More toxicity for them. And the choice that they're making of maybe I want to take some opium or cannabis instead, those choices are being made at a genetic level. And we're punishing them for it and criminalizing them for it. And so that's paramount to slavery, really. And the roots of it are in slavery. You've got particularly, I love Americans, and a lot of beautiful things have come out of the United States. So I don't want to be down on Americans, but something that came out of the culture where you've got a slave culture which then got turned around, and then a desire to keep that people group down was, I think, that the roots of this prohibition, drug war, are in that slave driving culture, and that it needs to be kind of uprooted and treated the same way.
Yeah, and that was kind of, to skip ahead a little bit, you found success with a replacement for meth, and then you took on alcohol next. Right?
Yeah. Went to the government. They said, if you've got a safer alternative to meth, then it's going to stop the deaths that are happening. Horrible things were happening. organised crime was on the rise. They said, if that works, Matt, we're going to tell the police to leave you alone, and if it works, then we'll change the laws and we'll build a regulatory system. Okay, and that's what we did. Over 10 years, it worked. 50, 60,000 people quit meth. 20% of the adult population tried the pills. 45.6% of them said that they were using our legal party pills because they just stopped using illegal drugs. Another 44.1% said that they were using so that they didn't have to use illegal drugs.
So about 10% of the population in New Zealand was taking meth?
I think it was 8 or 9% of the adult population at that time said that they had tried meth. I think that's what it was. Yeah, there's no cocaine, okay, and people go out to party, and in the nightclubs that's what's going on. So all of the people that are in the age group where they are going out in the evenings to socialise and potentially meet a significant other or whatever, that normal human mating ritual that's happening, just as it has from the dawn of time, that ritual seems to happen in the late evenings, and people need to change gear in their brain, which is a completely normal behaviour that humans have engaged in from the dawn of time. They use the tools and the plants and things around them. They consume something to increase their confidence, decrease their inhibitions, and make it more likely that they're going to be able to find a partner to pair with or mate with. Totally normal behaviour, not a deviant behaviour at all. And so people use what's around, and if meth is what's around, that's what's in supply, and that's what's going to be consumed. Yeah, it's totally normal. It's just the way I explain like this is because these are laws. We try to make laws. This is what I say to politicians. You can make whatever laws you like, but if you make a law that orchards are messy because there are rotten apples everywhere, therefore the rotten apples must rise up and stay in the trees, that's not going to work because you've gone against the laws of nature. You can't legislate against laws of nature. You can't go against gravity. In the same way, it would be just as stupid to try to legislate against the laws of supply and demand, against economic laws. If you make the drugs illegal when there's massive demand for them, and you try to reduce the supply by funding law enforcement and border control, all that happens is the value goes up, the demand is still there, and as the value goes up, the price goes up, it just becomes more expensive, and then people need to resort to crime, especially if they're addicts, because their primary drive is going to be to use the substance they're addicted to, and that's going to overrule all the other morals and things that are going on in their lives. And so instead you need to reduce the demand by supplying a safer alternative. That is the common sense way to reduce harm.
One thing with your product, since it was not addictive, because it sounds like the come down wasn't the best, right? Wasn't that bad for business though? I guess people probably wouldn't be eager to do it all the time.
That's right.
I was just wondering.
I really wasn't motivated by the business. I didn't patent my technology, and I just let it out there, and everybody copied. And there was suddenly there's 20 or 30 different people selling these things, and everyone was making them a little bit stronger. And I just pulled back and got everyone together and said, hey, look, I'll deal with the media and the government, and you guys can just put money in a kitty to pay the lawyers and to pay my expenses, and I'll just be this guy doing this. And so I had pretty good, clean, pure motives for a long time, until things changed. And eventually I got sick of trying to have committee meetings for the industry to try to move things in the right direction, because the other business entities, their primary drive is to maximise profit and keep revenue going, which is not quite aligned with what I was trying to do in having a social responsibility angle and trying to create something that's going to work for the community. And so there were clashes there, and then I took advice that it would be better if I just developed the technology, built the factory, manufactured everything, took all the money, because then I'd be able to be totally in control of, I'd be like I had a ring that I could rule everything with, And unfortunately, I guess my ethics got a little polluted, or it just got so hard to do the right thing all the time when there's such a massive push. And we started. The market kind of went in the direction of synthetic cannabinoids. Everyone, again, an election came up, the liquor industry were losing money, people were choosing to buy our pills instead of alcohol because it's more economical for a night out and a better buzz, and your night goes longer and you're not drunk. And The liquor industry rose up during election time and said to the government, you need to stop the party pills or we're not going to pay for the election. I didn't really notice it so much the first time it happened. That's what happened. The party pills got banned and BZP got taken off the market. Ecstasy deaths and meth craziness started happening again. Organised crime rejoiced. And the market started going towards synthetic alternatives to cannabis. And I was kind of excited about that on one hand because I thought, well, hey, it looks like cannabis has got some... is really useful for pain and for cancer and for epilepsy. If we start doing research into cannabinoids, maybe we can find some superior compounds. And so by this stage, I convinced the government that they could let us, that they should have a law that says people can apply for a research license and build a lab and start manufacturing. And then we got that through Parliament, and I applied for the license and got it and built a lab. And so we started, and I had a bunch of chemists working for me, and we started designing all these molecules. And we designed, we got one that was like a THC analog that's 1,000 times the potency of THC at the receptor site, where the dosages are right down at 10 micrograms. You've got the tiniest amount that you can't even see on your pipe, and you inhale near it, and you're really, really stoned. Beautiful psychedelic kind of a buzz. But as we were creating these things, even if whether we patented them or just got labs to make them or whatever, they just started leaking out, and then we'd get reports of shootouts happening in Russia with the KGB over massive shipments of this chemical that we'd developed in our lab. And all these just crazy things happening around the world. It was just so out of control. And of course we were making a lot of money at that stage as well.
How did that feel, knowing that your work was affecting so much in the world?
How did it feel? At first, when party pills were out there and hundreds of thousands of people were taking our drugs, it was kind of scary. Oh shit, I thought I was just doing something for a few people in my local clubbing community, and now other people have copied it. And instead of just being sold, we used to sell just the products in nightclubs or where you buy your drug paraphernalia and try to keep it underground. But the media grabbed it, and it was on the 6 o'clock news. It was the main leading story, was our drugs. And then everybody wanted to try them, and suddenly 20% of the adult population are taking them, and then you start getting phone calls from the hospital. Hey, there's someone in here who's taken 50 of your pills, and those it's a scary time to think, is someone going to lose their life? But thank God, 26 million pills later, there were no deaths, there were no fatalities. We did everything we could. When we got data from overdoses and on people's bloods and so on, what the electrolyte imbalances were, and then we tried to correct that in the formula. And if there was too much strain on the heart, then what can we do in the formula to empower and strengthen the heart muscle so that it keeps going? And then, we just had no fatalities. We kept improving the formula, improving. There's too many come downs. What can we do to supplement the upstream supplementation of neurotransmitters so that we can alleviate the come down? And can we put those things into slow release tablet formulations so that the active drug hits, and then later on, as things are dissolving in your stomach, you get all the aminos that you need to replace your neurotransmitters to overcome the come down. And we're just doing all that kind of technology. What sort of antioxidants can we put in there to clean up after the pill? And then
we're coming up in an hour. Is it okay if we go over a little bit?
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just ready.
No, I just know you have stuff you have to do today.
Yeah,
I don't mind if we go over.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, okay,
good.
Cool.
Where do you want to go next with it? It felt kind of scary, but I had a doctor friend of mine who took me aside one night in a club when I was getting upset and said, listen, I've done a bunch of training as a doctor, and what I understand is this, that I'm going to try my best to help people. Sometimes in my career, I know that I will make mistakes, and sometimes as a result of the mistakes that I make in my career, somebody is going to lose their life. But more often than not, I'm going to save lives far more than I'm going to lose. And that's what happens when you're a doctor. And it's the same for you, Matt. You have saved many, many lives, and what you're doing is, particularly with providing safer alternatives, we were getting tens of thousands of people off addictive drugs and making products which were not going to kill people. And so often we saved a lot of lives. But there's always that fear of what happens when it goes wrong and someone loses their life or someone does get addicted. And so that was something you have to live with.
Yeah. What was your relationship with God at this point like? This is a pretty heavy thing to deal with in reality.
I felt like I was a messenger or a spokesperson, that I could sit down with media or a politician, and this presence would be around me, and I could speak clearly and just in allegories and stories so that people could understand this is the way forward, this is the thing we need to do. That was cool. But once the millions of dollars started coming in, I had a friend of mine who talked to me about manifestation and said, Matt, you're doing all this stuff. All my friends had like Lamborghinis and big houses on the cliff and all this and lots of money. I didn't. I couldn't make my mortgage payments, because I just didn't really chase the dollars. I wasn't interested in that thing. He said, just believe in your mind that you've got like a figure, like 20 million or 10 million, whatever it is, until it happens, and don't let anything else in your mind and manifest it, And I thought, oh wow, this is kind of like the faith in the mountain. Okay, God, let's just do this. And so I started using that manifestation without having a really good intention behind it. I was just like a guy at the gym, just trying to push a big weight or something, or just trying to achieve something for the sake of ego, or it is an experiment, not with a really good, clear intention at all. And
in practice, this was just like holding the idea of $10 million or something?
Yeah. Until it manifested, and when it came, there was just a whole lot of trouble came with it. And I just have real words of warning and caution for people doing that, and the way that we do a lot of manifestation, if it's just head, power, magic, without a lot of real nice intention behind it, it can go really badly and you can seriously regret it. I remember I had a beautiful, if you've seen the Vice documentary, had a beautiful lighthouse up on the cliff and one nice house in the country and all this stuff, and I remember sitting down by my little stream one day feeling so conflicted and feeling I can't feel the presence of the love, creator, Christ, spirit thing around me anymore. I feel like, I said one day, I feel like if you asked me to give up all of my wealth and my asset base, that I would have trouble saying yes. I feel like it's the most important thing to me now. I feel like there is this weight, I call it the gravity of gold, which is just pulling me and locking me into this earth realm. Please take away everything that I don't need. Take it all away. And if you ever pray a prayer like that, again, great caution, it took 48 hours for that question, that prayer to be answered. Wow. And in that 48 hours, someone had come to me and said, Matt, someone in the government came and said, hey Matt, the USA have sent us a diplomatic communication. We'd got to United Nations and presented our policy. United Nations Drug Control said, well done New Zealand, this is the only solution on the table for the emerging drugs threat. And many countries had gone into workshops with New Zealand government about how this could work for their country. And I thought I was going to get like a ticker tape parade and a knighthood, I just about needed a truck or a trolley to carry around my ego. And then someone in Parliament came and said to me, the liquor industry have talked to the Prime Minister, during the election you're going down, so get ready. I didn't know what that meant. Prayed the prayer. 48 hours later, the Prime Minister changed the laws overnight, made everything I was doing illegal, inserted a new piece of a clause into primary legislation saying the industry may not seek compensation, because normally if they change the laws overnight and you lose millions of dollars, you get a payout, unless they write a clause in, totally unprecedented, just to fuck you over.
And at least like the cause and effect here was because you tried to take on the liquor industry?
Yeah, I'd gone out and said, look, it's great that we've got a safer alternative to meth. Not so excited about the alternative to cannabis, but the real dangerous drug that kills 1,000 people in our country every day, 2 or 3 Kiwis every day lose their lives because they chose to consume the drug alcohol. This and tobacco are the 2 main killers in our country. Do we want our future generations consuming these drugs, crashing their cars into trees and dying of this horrific addiction? Or let's do it differently for our next generation. We're now going to use our research license to develop safer alternatives to alcohol. It's not going to take that long. There are many ways that we can even tweak the same GABA receptors as alcohol does without this level of toxicity to every organ in the body. Bang, that was it.
Have you seen this product, Alcohol? I saw it advertised on Instagram. It's like, I guess it has the effect of alcohol, but it's just an air you inhale through a straw.
Is it still ethanol, or is it another?
I have no idea. I don't actually think it took off because I saw ads for it 1 month and then it was gone the next month. But
there's a few out there. David Nutt's got some. I started working on a project with him up in the UK, and then Dr. Z has another one.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on MDAI, it's MEAI, it's an amino indane, so it's a serotonin releaser which produces a feeling of satiety that you've had enough. David Nutt's working. He started just looking at, for instance, all of the anxiolytic kind of anxiety medicines that have been abandoned by pharmaceutical companies because they had too much of a drunken side effect. Just grabbing a hold of those and saying, well, we like the drunken side effect. These things are normally active in a dose range of 1 milligram as opposed to like 1,000 or 5,000 milligrams you need of alcohol. They're far less toxic. Let's use those instead. The liquor industry were terrified because this was just going to wipe them out. And they are massive multinationals. They are enormous.
Right.
And so having them pressure the government and maybe a little bit of pressure from other countries as well. Prime Minister said this is just a no-brainer. And when they want to take you down, even in New Zealand, the least corrupt country in the OECD, then this old boys network swings in, and first the bank come. They go to the bank and say, we just changed the laws. You guys are bankrolling a drug dealer and drug cartels. And so if you don't quit this client now, you're going to lose your international banking license. The bank's going to go out of business. Bank doesn't want to go out of business and lose their license, or a $250,000 fine for every transaction they process. So they just dump you. What that means is they took all my houses and just put them onto mortgagee sale, so I can't sell them. Hi, want to buy my house? It's worth $3 million. No, I've seen it on mortgagee sale. I think I can pick it up for $1. And then when the mortgagee sale comes, they cancel the auction and then sell it to one of their friends way cheaper. And so your asset base just disappears. And then the tax guys say, look, we've just done an audit of your life back to the start of your life. Isn't there a 7-year statute of limitations? Yeah, but there's a clause that says if we suspect there may have been illegal activity, there's no statute of limitations. So we've gone back to the start of your life, and a long time ago, we think you might have forgotten to pay some employee tax. And when we load on all the penalties and interest, there's an extra $1 million that you need to pay by Wednesday. And also, because of the particular thing that we've uncovered, it's also jail time. So we made a big offer and says the law says that you've got to accept our offer. I'll offer you my total net worth. And they said, yeah, but in special extenuating circumstances, the Director of Inland Revenue may, at his discretion, choose a certain individual and show them the full penalty of the law to encourage voluntary compliance in the remainder of the population, which means we don't give a fuck about the money. We just want to see you in jail, regardless of what the law says. They've got these powers they can use.
Yeah.
And so they just took everything. I just said, well, you know what, I'm just going to take my family, go live in Thailand for a while this all blows over and stop talking about alcohol alternatives. I get the message, so that was the end of that.
Yeah. And then you came over here with your family. You were here a year plus?
4 years.
Oh, 4 years, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And were you on a tourist visa the whole time? Or did you get some...
No, I was part of an organisation who do volunteer work, so I had a volunteer visa.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha. Cool. And then last year you moved to the Netherlands to work on a new project, right?
Yeah, I mean, sitting here in Thailand is when I thought, well, why don't I just take my time here to sort of find myself, reevaluate everything, have a look at, just do some vipassanas and study some yoga and meditation and just kind of expand my understanding of things. And I found out that this Eastern spirituality is pretty good for dealing with that ego kind of stuff, and living amongst, we went and lived out in Doisiket, just surrounded by rice paddies, and had to start learning Thai and just live in a place where there is really no money. There's no millions of dollars in supercars. It's all just kind of rice farmers and a much more simple life, just to see what it's like living like that for a while, particularly also for my family to see, hey, it's not all... where's my PlayStation, where's my Xbox, let's have a trip down the road. These kids here are saying, some of them don't have fingers, none of them have got a mummy or a daddy. We're actually really lucky, and just getting that shift of perspective, living in a different sort of world has been really good, I think, for the family. But
yeah, what was it like for your kids? Because I guess they were born into a lot of wealth and then kind of an abrupt shift.
Totally traumatic. Really, it's just total trauma. Losing everything, and then I was really depressed, and if you're a dude and you're really depressed and you totally lose your vision in life, then the sort of marriage there's too much pressure. My wife got really depressed as well, and so that was the most difficult time, really, that big crash, and just reevaluating values and stuff. So it was really tough on the kids and the family.
Gotcha.
Having to find a way back out of depression and kind of rebuild myself into a different person.
Yeah, and but then over these years, I guess you've refound yourself and you started a new business in Europe.
Yeah. So now I'm more focused on, let's look at all those cannabinoids and see, let's test them on cancer cells, and let's look at CBD, and maybe we can, basically using what I've learned so far about pharmaceuticals, to look at CBD in particular and the other cannabinoids, and knowing how to develop medicines and knowing how to test toxicity. That's kind of, I've got a startup now working on that, and we did develop some technology for producing cannabinoids, which we patented, and now we're sort of exploiting that. And I've worked out how to, rather than own and control everything myself, how to bring in venture capital, work with other partners, and all those kind of things that are a lot easier when you're not just thinking about yourself so much.
I guess that keeps you safer from, like, if there was like another legislative attack, having other big people in that old boys club helps. And also what I failed to do really was to do a proper stakeholder audit. I should have seen that, as well as finding a solution that's really good for the community and works for the government. I also should have thought about the fact that there are these big dinosaur corporate monsters, which are stakeholders because they are controlling the government, and I need to find a solution that works for them as well. So instead of saying I'm going to go into competition and take you guys out, it's more like, hey, I've got some technology you could use so that you can keep making even more money by using this new technology, because you're not going to kill your customers and make them sick anymore. So you're going to make more money this way. That needs to be what they need to hear. You know? So that's the solution. You want something that works for the community, works for the government, and works for the other corporates. Otherwise, they're going to kill you. I want to ask you about your kids, because I guess I've seen your daughter at like open mics and stuff, and like she's extremely talented. And I don't have children yet, but I've thought like, oh, like that's like I don't know if your kids grew up too fast with the situation or anything, but I've always thought that most people infantilize their children too long. Like you meet 30-year-old guys who still act like they're children around their parents. I'm wondering if, maybe it wasn't intentional, but do you have any thoughts on like your kids like seeing everything there is and not sheltering them and stuff?
I've got two amazing daughters, and one is very extroverted and one is very introverted, and we have always spoken to them like intelligent adults, because there's intelligent adults inside of them, and so they've always kind of surprised people really by engaging in conversations with adults and feeling like that they are as respected as anybody else, and that children need to be heard and seen, and they're both really intelligent. The truth is that today, from the moment they have the Wi-Fi password, they're exposed to everything. And so your options are to try to protect them, or just to try to contextualize everything with an age-appropriate description at the time. This is what I try to do. And some things you turn off and shut off when you can, but as they get to an age where, my kids will sit down at a healing house and open mics where there's adults sharing about a lot of sexual stuff or adult stuff and that, and it's like, okay, well, let's just come and check out some stuff on the Nature Channel, Discovery Channel, see what it's all about. This is what's happening, okay, this is what it's all about, okay. And they can process it and deal with it. If it's too gross, we just get the hell out. But I think you just got to contextualize it, and if you maintain a bit of a childlike, playful innocence yourself about life, then that's going to rub off, and you're still going to have that. And we play and we laugh, and it's okay to make adult jokes as well. Just not around other kids, because they might still be a little bit babyish.
So that's something you've kind of shared with your daughters, like other kids. I've always thought, like, if I have kids and I raise them in a very progressive way, what about the other parents that are now going to conflict with me when my kids hang out with their kids? Is that something you've had to deal with?
You can educate other parents as well. If you can explain things clearly enough, then the other parents can understand it too. Some people are just again, some people are driven by fear. There are two rivers that flow through the universe. You know, I believe one is love, empowerment, manifestation, and the other is fear. And you know, fear kind of leads to the dark side. And if someone's life motivation for the bringing up their kids is fear, then it's okay to confront that in them.
Cool. I think that's what I wanted to hear, but awesome. I do want to go back to one thing you said earlier about before we started taking hallucinogens or anything like that, your way of connecting with the divine was like praying and fasting. Was that something you intuited, or did you have a process or any?
I think I found that that being here, that studying Buddhism, studying meditation, has been a real good toolbox for my brain. Studying yoga and what came from India, what was revealed there, has been really good for my body. From the Christ background, there's a whole lot of stuff that's really good for the spirit. You need to filter the religion out, but then a lot of the stuff that he said, you know, some things only come out by fasting. So, you know, what does that mean? You got different parts of your being. I think that if you're just always being led by your body, you know, I like this girl, oh, I can't stop thinking about her, whatever, you know, those, or I want to eat this, or whatever it is, then you kind of, your mind and spirit can suffer a little. If you kind of say to your body, no, you can't just have what you want, just fall into place, come into alignment with the rest of the being. I think that's what fasting does. So denying that flesh part of you, then the spirit's more awakened. I'm not real good at it because I'm kind of a real skinny dude. If I fast for more than a couple of days, I lose blood pressure and start passing out. But before I get there, I can see angels and hear clearly.
Yeah, it makes you lighter.
Yeah.
Because like shamans always say to avoid meat and like high stimulation foods before a ceremony. I guess it's the same idea, right?
I think so. Yeah. Avoiding meat before a ceremony is probably good. Yeah. I think, you know, there's a thing, and particularly for, you know, Christians or people listening and thinking about maybe the drugs are bad. You just remember there's this moment after Christ's come and said, okay, we don't need to worry so much about the law and the commandments then anymore. Just the law's now to love the Creator as you, and then love other people as you love yourself, which means you got to love yourself. And then after that, there's this dude Peter, who's this buddy, and Peter's like, he's still trying to get people to follow all the food rules. Oh, don't eat pork or whatever, you know. And because, you know, you're coming into Judaism, and Christ was kind of like, no, they're not. Let's just flame the Judaism. No more cutting the end off your penis, you know. Just leave that stuff alone. And so this angel comes down, and he's got a sheet, like he's going to have a picnic, and he puts it in front of him, and all of the unclean foods are on the sheet, like all of the forbidden foods, that is, all of the things that you're told you're not allowed to eat. So that'd be like your pork. What else is going to be on there? I guess your magic mushrooms will be on there, maybe your cannabis and maybe your acid and all those kind of things. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. It's, you know, it's what comes out that defiles you. And so I'm not real big on the thou shalt not eat this and the food regulations. I still eat meat or whatever, you know. But I find sometimes it's, if you take a break from those things, then there's benefit in it, you know. Yeah. So there's no hard and fast rules. I don't really. Yeah, I found that spirituality and spiritual power can come just as easily when you're not following all those rules, you know, to just let it come. It's coming from somewhere else when it feels like coming.
Yeah, like the drunken monk thing or something.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, this has been super awesome. I'm so grateful we had the time to do this. Yeah. Just last little bit, right now the thing, I mean, you showed us one of the products I guess your company makes. It's a pro drug. Do you mind like just explaining what that is?
Okay, we're going to have to edit. I didn't make that. Someone else gave
it to me. Okay,
yeah.
Never mind. All right, I'm going to edit that out.
Do you want to talk about the pro drug though? What it is? What is it? You can use it if you want it.
I guess it's not necessary if it's not attached to you. We'll just cut that out. Okay, well, that's my last thing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Groovy.